Hello, everyone, and welcome to UGA Sports Rumors versus Facts. I am Blaine Gilmer here with Jed May, and we are talking Georgia football recruiting once again. Welcome in. As you do so, go ahead and hit that like button while you're in here for us. That helps out always. Subscribe. We're inching ever closer to that 36,000 subscriber mark, and that's the largest amount out there thanks to you guys and the growth of this channel over the last year and a half. So appreciate that. But here we talk all Georgia football recruiting, as I said, and Jed and I will be going through a bunch of things, visitors coming up, some new targets kind of emerging for Georgia here as of late. And then, of course, the updates on quarterbacks. One Dylan Rowell, especially going out there with everything that's being said about him. As always, this show is presented by Turner Wood and Smith in cooperation with Auto Owners Insurance. More about them a little bit later, but you can see them and you can see all the details on them in the description below. But Jed, how's everything going this evening, man?
Going good. Just got back from the combine in Indianapolis, which it's funny. It's a little bit like recruiting because a lot of these guys are getting asked about teams. What would it be like to play for the Steelers or Dolphins or whatever? It reminds me a little bit of the questions we ask these prospects. So, but glad to be back and ready to talk some recruiting.
Absolutely. And you wrote an article. I would just go ahead and right off the top, we're going to talk about some new kind of emerging targets for Georgia, specifically kind of on that offensive line. There's a couple of guys that have received some offers as of late and things like that. But one being Aiden Lynch, who's from the up around the New Jersey area, has a wingspan like a dang condor, man. I mean, I think he's like 6'7", wingspan around 82 inches. So he's got some long arms, and he's a guy who picked up a Power 5 offer from Georgia, his first Power 5 offer. So tell us about Aiden Lynch and kind of how that all came about.
Yeah, it's weird because you don't see Georgia being the first Power Five offer. For a lot of kids, it usually comes from a local team or whatever. Like Rutgers would have been a perfect thought with Aiden Lynch, but Fran Brown just kind of happened upon him and watched his film and reached out and it went from there. And he's Aiden is a big college football guy, being from New Jersey, and so he knows the Georgia program. He's a Giants fan, so he knows Andrew Thomas. And it meant a lot to him. Fran Brown, when he called and extended the offer, he made sure that Aiden's family was on the phone with him. So family is kind of the emerging thought about Georgia for him right now, is visiting on March 25th for a spring practice. And look, it's obviously early in this recruitment, being that Georgia's his first Power 5 offer. He's gotten Pitt since then. I'm sure there'll be more to come. But when you're a kid like this and a school like Georgia is the first one, because Pitt, and I don't know, I don't talk to Pitt coaches, but Pitt could have seen, oh, this kid got offered from Georgia, we need to investigate. When a school like Georgia is the first one to seek you out, do the research, and then extend that offer, it's going to mean a lot to a kid like Aiden, who's kind of a late bloomer. So, he told me Georgia's at the top, which isn't too surprising, and he's going to visit Athens in a couple weeks, see what it feels like in Athens, if he could play. If he feels like Athens is a place he could be. But like you said, Blaine, he's got a great frame. He's at 283 pounds, which doesn't sound like a lot, but there's obviously almost a full year before he would be on campus, so plenty of time to add some weight, and got some athleticism, playing the game for a long time. And yeah, we'll see how it develops once he visits here in about 3 weeks.
Yeah, they also offered another offensive lineman, Ethan Callaway, lately, and then of course, Jordan Seton is not necessarily a new prospect. He was there for a junior day weekend in January, but there is some new news on him. With him dropping some top schools. Now there was a lot of them, but I feel like Georgia, based on Stacy Searles and what happened in that visit, that Georgia's pretty high up there in that new list for Jordan Seton.
Yeah, definitely think Georgia's in there. I think one of our vault questions is Georgia in the top group. I'd say they're probably top 5, maybe, at least. I mean, at this point, I would say Georgia's in good shape to get one of those official visits, and we'll see after that. But yeah, getting him on campus in January was huge. And like you said, it went pretty well. We kind of got some reports after that, and he's one of those guys. And it was interesting when I was writing about Ernest Green at the combine, I noticed that Rivals actually had Ernest listed as a guard, and I think the same is true with Jordan Seton. So a guy that could probably play both. And you look at him and Daniel Calhoun are kind of targets 1A and 1B. right now. And then you've got guys behind him like Aiden, like we mentioned. We've got I'm sure they won't give up with Cam Pringle. There's shoot, I'm missing a lot of guys I know. Jonathan Daniels, Fletcher
Yeah.
Westfall, Timothy Lewis. I got to pull my little list up here. Jaquan McCroy as a tackle who, I
Yeah,
spoke with
he can play both inside and outside.
Yeah, I mean Jaquan McCroy is huge. So, Mike White might be making a call to get him down in the paint in Stegman Coliseum whenever Stegman Coliseum reopens. So, a lot of guys out there. It's still kind of early from these guys, and we'll see how things kind of develop over the next month and a half or so with a lot of these spring visits coming up.
Absolutely. And we're going to get to some of those vault questions that you kind of alluded to there here in just a minute. But I did want to talk about on the defensive side of the ball, a guy and kind of newer name that emerged, Joseph Phillips. Okay. Joseph Phillips from Tuskegee, Alabama. All right. He is a guy that plays for Booker T. Washington High School, 4-star. He's in the Rivals 250. He visited Georgia on Friday. Talked to him over the weekend. He had some questions kind of about Georgia going in, okay, but just because he, not just Georgia, but everybody kind of jumped on this kid a little bit later. The month of December was really big for him. That's when he got his Georgia offer, and Glenn Schumann and Georgia really kind of started to establish that rapport with him. But then, as he said in his interview, the national championship game hit and Georgia got busy and all this kind of stuff. When it comes down to it, he was questioning, okay, is it going to pick back up? And he said as soon as the national championship game ended, Glenn Schumann and them got back in touch with him, told him they wanted him to come for a visit. And he came his first visit, like I said, this past Friday. From all indications, what he said, Georgia knocked it out of the park with, their messaging on player development, especially on that defensive side of the ball, the linebackers, what they've done. He was there during the combine while Nolan Smith and all those guys were doing their thing. So he saw the player, interaction and things like that. So Joseph Phillips is a guy who you need to keep an eye out for. Measured in at 6'2.5", 238. He hadn't run his 40 time yet because he's kind of been recovering from a little injury he had, but very quick off the edge, a guy that Glenn Schumann and company like a lot. They told him, hey, we don't see you as a guy with a high upside. We see you as a guy that is already really good that we want to bring into the program. Said they could use him first and second down as an inside backer, move him around on the outside on third and fourth downs, a la, Jalen Walker, Adam Anderson, how they did that. So to do that and be a guy that is used versatilely like that, Jed, I mean, it already tells you what kind of athlete they think that Joseph Phillips is.
Yeah, and they're trying to get maybe more of those guys that could play inside and outside. Braylon Wilson's a guy this year who I think could maybe grow into that Jalen Walker type role just because he's a freakish athlete. We all remember the sensor speeds had him at 22 or 21, 22 miles an hour during the season. So that's kind of one of the kind of maybe the next evolution. This inside linebacker. Okay, you've got the sideline to sideline guys. Now you get those guys that you can move inside and outside, and Joseph Phillips certainly fits that role.
Got a visit coming up this weekend. You mentioned right before we came on air. So tell the people who's going to be coming in town, or who at least who we've had down for a little while here.
Yeah, my unofficial list over here, I've got it written down. It's got Amari Jefferson from Chattanooga be in town. He is, I believe, listed as an athlete on Rivals. Georgia's recruiting him as a receiver. He actually goes to the same school as Will Muschamp's younger son, Witt. So that's the main connection there. He rose in the latest Rivals rankings, added that 4th star, not in the 250 yet, I don't think, but a guy that is clearly on the upswing. I've never seen him play. He was supposed to be at Under Armour last week or 2 weeks ago, and couldn't make it. But definitely excited to get back down to Athens. He's been a bunch of times, and I think this is really one of those visits that might cement where Georgia's going to be at heading into the summer and everything like that. Maybe try to lock in an official visit coming out of this one as well.
And correct me if I'm wrong, he was at one point committed to Tennessee as a baseball player, was he not?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think he might still be committed to Tennessee because I know BJ Gibson was committed to Tennessee. I know he's decommitted. Amari still might be committed. Not 100% sure.
I think these guys are playing multiple sports and the kind of athletes that they are. So, Amari, guy that Georgia, I think, would be looking at ultimately to play receiver. I think if he came now, I mean, Kirby, anytime there's a guy that's between a DB and receiver, Kirby's going to try to throw his hat in there all the time, I think, and try to put him over on the defensive side of the ball there, Jed, or that's what it seems to be. But, at least that's the case with like KJ Bolden and some of these guys that Georgia would be after that can go both ways. But yeah, Amari Jefferson, that's a visit that everybody needs to, look out for, and should be interesting. But the really big visits, I think, really start to kick into gear on March 16th. And that's when Julian Lewis is going to come to town. And yes, I know he's a 2026 quarterback, but we've talked ad nauseum here about how much effort Georgia has already put into that recruitment. I mean, ever since he was in 7th grade, he's been making visits to Georgia. He's been doing the kind of the initiation to keep up with Georgia, as he's not a rising senior yet, so he can't necessarily be contacted by the staff. He has to initiate the contact. But Jed, that's just that starts off a big run of quarterback visits with Julian Lewis, Puglisi, Dylan Raiola, and then a couple weeks later, you're going to have Ryan Montgomery coming into town. So there's 4 quarterback visits kind of back to back coming there. I know Merklinger is coming at some point. I'm not sure the date of when he's coming in for spring.
March 19th, I believe, is what he told us at the Rivals camp or at Under Armour. But yeah, I mean, it makes sense because you would like to get your visitors in for a practice, because if you think about it, this is really about the only time these kids will get an opportunity to go to a Georgia practice, because in the fall they got their own practices going on, right? And so getting these guys in to see a spring practice, see how things operate, but from the quarterback specifically, meeting with Mike Bobo, talking about the offense, seeing the offense in person, how he relates to Carson Beck and Vandegrift and Gunnar Stockton and those guys. So it'll be huge for them to kind of see how things look, because obviously in these guys' recruitments, none of them know anything other than a Todd Monken-led offense. So getting an introduction to how Mike Bobo does things is huge, especially when you can kind of get him in that practice setting to see how he works on the field as well as off.
Absolutely. I did want to mention here, take a little break and mention that this show is presented by Turner Wood & Smith Insurance, headquartered in Gainesville, Georgia, my hometown here, but they service the entire state, region, nationally. If you have insurance needs, Turner Wood & Smith Insurance is who you need to contact. Great customer service, a hometown feel. They've been around over 100 years, and they have great policy providers that they work with, like Auto Owners Insurance, life, home, car, business. Listen, my family, Auto Owners and Turner Wood & Smith have taken care of us, and they can do the same for you. Like I said, both companies around for over 100 years, so established and ready to help you with your insurance needs. Jed, as always, we want to welcome everybody in that's in the YouTube chat over here. Hadn't addressed them yet. We got Jeff Hightoff. We got Bobby Sagas, Rhett Womack, Jason Hildreth. We got Joseph Boswell, Paul Duringer, Randy Payne, as always, from Tifton, Georgia. Appreciate you being in. Andy Stowe, the living legend, is in here. Somebody actually said they were Larry Zabisco, so that would truly be the living legend in there. OU Herschel Walker, and yeah, we got a bunch of them in here. Jeremy Barbary, of course, in here once again. So go ahead and hit that like button while you're in here, guys. We're about to get to the vault questions, and we'll be hitting some of these YouTube chats as we go throughout. But we always, Alton Calhoun just joined us right here. Paul says, "Don't talk about Andy like that." Okay, Paul, we'll leave Andy at regular status for you while he's in here. But Andy, once Paul leaves, you'll go back to legend status. But so when it comes down to it, there's a lot of visits, a lot of developments going on. But I just want to address the whole thing with Dylan Raiola right off the top. Before we get going into it. Listen, I know that it seems to be, the internet loves to go wild and put different things about every other week and stuff like that. But I would just tell people, if you've been on the UGA Sports Vault, if you have been with us since December, when Dylan Rowell decommitted from Ohio State, and I said, listen, Georgia's going to be very, very hard to beat, if not that at that time the absolute favorite for Dylan Raiola. And a lot of people like came and said, oh no, he's going to commit to Nebraska within a month and all that kind of stuff. Well, that didn't happen. Okay, then people start coming a couple of weeks ago and saying that, you know, he was at a basketball game, he's going to commit to Nebraska. People putting in predictions, all this kind of stuff for him in Nebraska. Didn't happen. Now he goes to USC on a visit. Everybody's putting in predictions, all this kind of stuff. I'm just telling you, I know directly that Dylan Raiola is not going to rush into a commitment. He did that the first time. He felt that was a mistake. Did not enjoy how that all went down. And now these visits will be taken. The thought will be put into this decision. But for the narrative out there of saying that Georgia, for some reason, is not in this recruitment, or Georgia doesn't have a chance to land Dylan Raiola, is just 100% false. I mean, it's just not the truth right now, Jed. Because I'll tell you one thing. Let's look at some of the things that are going on. We said on January 11th, put a note out that said, "Hey, keep an eye on Jeremiah Smith to be visiting Georgia this summer. Oh, and by the way, he's really good friends with Dylan Raiola, who he was once committed to Ohio State with at the same time." And lo and behold, they're coming in on June 2nd through 4th. Who are they also coming in with? They're also coming in with Peyton Woodyard, who the night that these USC predictions start going out and all that kind of stuff, who's he with? He's with Peyton Woodyard when this is going on. So I mean, it is crazy to see how much momentum and people, you know, think that they're getting off visit highs and stuff like that. Jed, I just say this is a recruitment that you're going to have to let all the visits take place, and then I think the chips will fall where they may there. But for anybody to say that this one is over, or that this one, you know, that Georgia is eliminated from contention, I just don't think has a pulse on this recruitment.
Well, like you said, I mean, if you really stop and think about this particular recruitment, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like you said, he felt like he rushed the first commitment, and the first commitment, by the way, where it seemed like Georgia was in good position the first time, right? And then the Ohio State commitment kind of came out of nowhere. But it doesn't make sense to back off a commitment you felt was rushed, only to then recommit without taking all the planned visits. Like, it just logically that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. So like you said, it's going to play out. Dylan, I believe, is told us he's going to be in Athens in March as well, right? Or in April.
Oh, well, that's another thing. Yeah. He broke the news here on Rumors versus Facts in his in-person interview with us. Hey, I'm going to be in Athens March 18th. He goes to a basketball game. People start reporting, well, that visit to Georgia may not even happen. It's canceled, all that kind of stuff. Well, guess what? He's going to be there not only for the 18th, but also for the 19th. He's staying 2 days. We never wavered for that one. We never wavered from that Jeremiah Smith was being targeted with him when he, you know, flipped from Ohio State, or when he decommitted from Ohio State, that Georgia was going to then go after his presumed number one target there at Ohio State. Guys, there is nothing in this recruitment that lines up detrimental to Georgia at this point. There's nothing. Am I saying that he's going to 100% end up with Georgia? Absolutely not. I'm not saying it's a guaranteed thing, because it's a high school kid and it's recruitment and the day of NIL and everything else. But to say that Georgia is eliminated from contention, that these visits, and when I say visits, I mean one in March, maybe another one before his official visit, and then the official visit with Peyton Woodyard, a guy who also was on our show, Rumors versus Facts, and says, hey, me and Dylan Raiola are talking about rooming together, you know, on live, on air already. I mean, listen, all you can all you can do is, if you're Kirby Smart, Mike Bobo, the Georgia staff, is put yourself in a position to be there at the end of this and get him on campus without his mind, made up one way or the other for the official visit. And that's going to happen. He's going to come in with no decision having been made, because the family is going to take their time. Know that for a fact, 100%. And, Jed, I feel like that people are also discounting, you look at the USC situation. USC also, not that Dylan Rolo is scared of any competition at all, or should be, but USC's got a pretty decent guy in that 2023 class that's already on campus in Malachi Nelson, where Georgia does not.
Right. Yeah. If you want to pitch, and it's so funny because it's different than the narrative around the Arch Manning recruitment last summer. Realize if you're Georgia, like you could, there's the competition will be probably more wide open next year, depending on what happens. Like, if Carson Beck is here, if he goes to the NFL, who transfers, whatever. But there's a decent chance Georgia's got a wide open quarterback competition going into 24 as well. So you can pitch Raiola, hey, if it's open, it's you, it's Puglisi, it's whichever other guys are still here. Whereas, like you said, Georgia not having that guy in the 23 class and USC does. From that perspective, and that's why you have a year of separation. That's why this works out, is to pitch it to the guys one class down the road. So we'll see. But yeah, definitely the thinking that he would go into USC and just start right away is ridiculous, because like you said, they've got Malachi Nelson, who will have a year in Lincoln Riley's system by that point.
Yeah, listen, same thing with former 5-star at one point, Gunnar Stockton. He's going to have years under his belt at Georgia if and when Dylan Rowell arrives in Athens. If that were to happen, that would be a case. He would have to play with him. He would have to play against Ryan Puglisi. Okay, people forget about this young man. Okay, not that he is, in no way is he some kind of second fiddle playing all this kind of stuff. If I were like you, Jed, and I were in charge of the national recruiting rankings, as you are, we know that you have the football as the president done with the nuclear codes. You have the football when it comes to these national recruiting rankings. For the life of me, I can't figure out why you don't have Puglisi like right up there, right behind Raiola. But listen, he's uber talented. Okay, tremendously gifted with the way that he is able to navigate in and out of the pocket, and has a strong arm. Yeah, the competition level, being up there in the New England area, I'm sure that they're going to have to, there's going to be an adjustment period. There was an adjustment period for Gunnar Stockton coming from Double A. There was an adjustment period for Brock Vandergriff, coming from Single A. You have to get used to college football, right? But listen, both of them are tremendously talented, and I think Georgia has a legitimate shot. If it was pie in the sky, Jed, if it was like, hey, this is just something we don't get paid for clicks, right? We get paid for subscribers. And how do you keep subscribers? You give them accurate information. Okay. And that's what we're trying to do, is give you the most accurate information. And I'm telling you that there's a legitimate chance, a very, very good chance, that Ryan Puglisi and Dylan Raiola end up in this class, because one, Ryan Puglisi is not scared of the competition. He's plenty good enough to be in that competition. And I just think that right now, I don't see anything that's detrimental to the recruitment especially with the change to Bobo. A lot of people I've seen, have you seen these comments out there saying, oh, well, as soon as Monken left, we knew that Rowell was going to go elsewhere and stuff. That's just not the case. Okay. You forget Todd Monken was there the first time when Dylan Rowell committed to Ohio State, right? I think Mike Bobo is very, very well. I know Mike Bobo is very, very well liked by the Rowell family. And, Jed, he just so happened to have coached a guy who the Rowells are pretty familiar with.
Yeah. Matthew Stafford, what more ringing endorsement and could you get when you consider Dylan's dad was Stafford center with the Lions? And that's not like receiver tight end relationship. I mean, centers and quarterbacks are like this, right? So um, that's a pretty ringing endorsement of Mike Bobo with obviously, you know, who better to endorse what Mike Bobo can do and how he can develop you than a guy who came in as a raw, very talented and was a highly rated recruit, but a guy who comes in with a big arm and is developed into the number one pick in the NFL draft and eventual Super Bowl champion. So that's a very unique connection. There's obviously the family connections at Nebraska too, but that's certainly something that could a family type connection anyway that could work in Georgia's favor.
Yeah, no doubt. But what I'm at the end of this, when it boils down to it, what I'm telling you is I am not telling you he's not going to go to USC. I'm not telling you he's not going to go to Nebraska. I'm not telling you he's not going to Georgia. That's what I'm saying. I'm not ruling any of the three out. And I'm telling you that Georgia has just as good, if not better, of a chance to land him than any of the other places, just because of all these accumulating factors that are in it. But so keep following us on the vault. If you don't already, hey, this is why you need to be there, because things like Jeremiah Smith was going to visit back on January 11th when we told you it was happening there. So appreciate everybody tuning in. Hit that like button, turn on notifications, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff. Now, Jed, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into our vault questions. We'll mix in some YouTube ones, so be dropping some YouTube questions as you go. Remember, these vault questions brought to you by Turner Wood Smith and Auto Owners Insurance. And here we go with Darth Janus leading it off.
Yeah, it says, do you often see predictions that you feel have a motive other than accurately predicting where a prospect will go? And what visit weekend do y'all have your eyes on?
I don't know that the people putting in the predictions have the motive at time. I think that the people feeding them the information sometimes have a motive, Jed. And you're only as good in this line of work. You're only as good as the person that's giving you the information, right? Listen, there's been times where people that you and I trust and that we believe have given us information, and we have reported it as face value, as what it is, that information they give us, and it ends up not being what ends up happening. But other times, a lot of times, if you just follow that and say, hey, I trust this person, this is what they're telling me, and this is what they're going with, that's often the case. But I can just tell you, in this scenario, with what we were talking about with Rowell, the information that comes directly from the source contradicts what is being put out there. So that's what I'm saying. What do you feel about, predictions maybe having ulterior motives and things like that at some time?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I don't think like if I was to put in a prediction, I don't know what motive I would have that would make me put in a prediction for a kid. But like you said, there's definitely, you can get bad information, or not even necessarily bad information, but one-sided information. That was the frustrating and I know we got a question about frustrating recruitments later, but the thing about the Arch Manning recruitment last year was that everyone is clamoring for information, and you don't talk to the kid ever, you don't talk to the family ever. So you were really limited in what you could get. So Arch never went to camps. He never went to, at least since I covered him, and that was only last summer and summer before. So yeah, I don't know about ulterior motives or trying to screw over
The
one.
only ulterior motive I could think of would be, hey, if you're being dictated to that you have to put a piece of content out there, and it's probably going to get some clicks, and maybe your revenue is driven off of how many clicks you get, and it drives up your ad revenue. That would be the only ulterior motive I could think. But I don't know that that's necessarily the case with a lot of people. But who knows? It has happened. What visit weekend do you have your eyes on, Jed? What I know which one comes to mind for me. So which one is your one that you've got circled on your calendar?
Yeah, it's that weekend. Trying to do math in my head, that because that March 18th, 19th, 20th window, because Raiola, Puglisi, Jake Merklinger is going to be there on the 19th, is what he told us. So that's a lot of quarterback talent coming through in a short period of time. And then G-Day weekend, obviously, because that's huge. Justin Scott from Chicago is taking his official visit that weekend. I'm sure there'll be more visitors, official or unofficial, that'll be streaming into town for that weekend, especially with the Rivals camp in Atlanta the next day. That's a little nice twist of fate that might work in Georgia's favor. But it's really those two. And like you said, things are going to pick up for Georgia when spring practice starts next week, just so they can get guys in and see what's going on. But yeah, definitely that 18th to 20th. I don't know what day is Friday and whatever, but definitely that weekend and then G-Day weekend are the two I'd keep an eye on.
No doubt. On the YouTube, Chad, Brian Schaefer talking about Dylan Rowell and the chat is going on. He goes, he wants him to go to the Dogs, but he's almost guaranteed to win a Heisman Trophy with Lincoln Riley. Well, only caveat to that would be, listen, Lincoln Riley's about to find himself in the Big Ten, okay? And as soon as USC ends up in the Big Ten, I would argue that they're automatically the at best fourth best program. Because if you play that kind of defense, even close, they would, even if they got twice as good defensively as they are right now, you're finishing fourth best in the Big Ten. We saw Ohio State. We've seen what Michigan's done. We've seen Penn State. So USC's got a long way to go on that side of the ball. So that's just something to think about, because typically to win the Heisman, you got to win games. That's kind of how that goes. But all right, here we go. Let's go with I didn't answer the question. The visit weekend. My visit weekend that I'm looking at is June 2nd through 4th. Okay. That is Dylan Rowell's official visit. That is Jeremiah Smith coming on official visit with him. That is Peyton Woodyard, who is going to be recruiting both of those guys. That is Daniel Calhoun. That is Joseph Phillips that we talked about at the beginning of the show from Alabama.
It's going to be huge.
Jarrett Gibson. As you said, Aaron Butler, who is a guy that Georgia is just absolutely all over right now from Alec Calabasas at receiver. So, listen, a big, huge weekend, first weekend in June. All right, Andy Stowe says, when will the RVF NWO style shirts be available? Listen, I had a little fun on the vault. Came up with a Rumors versus Facts NWO style logo. I got to work on, get those printed up and stuff like that. But if there's enough interest out there, let us know. Would you want the white and black or the red and black out there for the NWO style? And he said last week mentioned solid commits 3, I believe. I'm assuming you can't tell us. No, I mean that's the nature of being silent. I'm not gonna float people's business out there, but I will say that we've talked about a couple of the names here on the show already that I feel are that Georgia sits in very good position with. All right, Jed, what do we got here from Medical Dog?
Can you compare and contrast the Manning and Raiola recruitments at this stage, and will we be the runner-up despite favorable reports during the middle part of those recruitments?
Okay, can you compare and contrast Manning and Raiola recruitments at this stage? Okay, so plain and simple, it was just a whole lot more of a mystery with Manning in terms of, like you said, Jed, you didn't get to talk directly to the player. You didn't, he just wasn't as available, didn't give as much access, things like that, a lot more protected. I think you're probably going to see it become that way as all this overreaction continues to happen on these visits with the Raiolas. But I think that's the biggest thing. And the other thing is too, Raiola has already been committed elsewhere. He knows what that's like. He knows what he's looking for now. I think there was just always so much ambiguity around the Manning situation. I feel like there's a whole lot more certainty and clarity about Raiola and what he's wanting and what he's looking for and what he's communicating to those that are listening.
Yeah, right. And like you said, the already being committed is, and I think it's a huge thing just because he knows what he is looking for, what he isn't looking for, I don't know, what went wrong in the first iteration of this process that he's really going to be looking out for. It's a totally different mindset in a second recruitment, for lack of a better term, than the first with Arch Manning. And like you said, it's just so different when you have been all over this recruitment. Shameless plug for Blaine here. Blaine's been all over it, and it helps a lot, like you said, when you've got actual sources on all sides of this thing. So, yeah, it's just the Arch Manning thing is a wild congruence of factors when you've got an extremely talented kid from that family, all that kind, doesn't have social media. I mean, just a million different things going on that just made that recruitment a unicorn, really.
Yeah, it's almost like he was, it's almost like he was you couldn't even really get anything out of fellow recruits about Arch Manning. It's almost like they'd it's like they could tell you, but they'd have to kill you type thing, like that's it was like some kind of mob secret or something. Just totally different. Listen, like I said, Dylan Rowell is going to go one. He's a very religious young man. He's going to go one wherever he feels like the good Lord's leading him to go, and two, he's going to assess this situation from all angles, whether it's opportunity to play early, whether it's opportunity to win a championship, whether it's opportunity to be developed into a NFL player, that kind of thing. So there's all different kind of angles, and he's just going to take his time and see what he what ends up being the best decision for him. But I can tell you right now that the best decision for him has not been made yet. All right, Big Fatty 94. Most annoying recruitment y'all have ever covered, Jed. What do you think?
Definitely in my short time doing this, it's Arch Manning. Although the Dylan Raiola one is shaping up to be a strong challenger if we keep going at this pace with the.
And none of this has to do with the kid. A lot of times,
no, absolutely
none of this has to do with the kid. A lot of it has to do with just the hysteria that goes on around it. I'll be honest with you. There's one in this cycle that I've just totally stopped following on Twitter and everything like that. I'm obviously not going to throw a name out there, but I just can't do it. It's just too much. Okay, so when your social media starts becoming a burden to people that cover recruiting, then that there's an indication there needs to be some changes made there. So that I don't think it would be wise for us to throw out a name of the most annoying recruitment we've ever had. I will say that I was just getting started covering recruiting when the Zach Evans saga went down, and that was nuts. Okay, that was absolutely nuts. It was crazy to cover that one. I don't know if there'll be another recruitment quite like the Zach Evans deal over there. All right, Jed, what we got from Pine Tree?
Yeah, anything new with Justin Scott and Edric Houston?
Yeah, so Justin Scott's going to be visiting. I feel like Georgia has just, garnered a ton of momentum there, Jed, since Trey Scott got involved, since that offer. He was all set to commit to a school, and I think Notre Dame in particular really kind of felt pretty good about that one until he decided to push off not long after getting that Georgia offer. Any more new information on Justin Scott as he's preparing to make his visit here, Jed?
Not much. Like you said, it's kind of in that, he pushed the recruitment back because he wanted to see Georgia and some other places. Now the next step is actually seeing them, right? I know he's a basketball guy up there in Chicago. Basketball season, I would assume, is just now ending. So might get out for some visits here soon. His official is, like I said, G-Day weekend. But it's really kind of been a holding pattern until he gets down to Athens, and then we'll see where things go after that. As far as Edric Houston, I checked in with him yesterday. He sent me some visits. He's visiting Oklahoma, Tennessee, Alabama, LSU, and Texas are on the docket for this spring. Obviously, it was in Athens for the championship celebration. And I think, and we noticed this, Blaine, with KJ Bolden's visits he tweeted out the other day. It seems like they might be going to see some schools they haven't seen yet before they really start getting things cranked up in the summer. Because as we told y'all, Georgia and Ohio State are kind of the main two for Edric Houston, or the leaders, I would guess, not necessarily the main two, but neither Georgia nor Ohio State's on that list. So maybe a chance to get out and see some places, schools we got a chance to establish themselves as contenders. But yeah, I still think maybe Ohio State's a little bit ahead for Edric Houston, and as far as Justin Scott, it's going to be Georgia's got their big swing at this thing coming up on G-Day weekend. So it'll be he'll be the biggest you know, he'll be the one they roll out the red carpet for that weekend for sure.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. We'll see how that one plays out. Listen, with the Edric Houston thing, I'd said, a while back that Ohio State was recruiting Edric Houston harder in terms of more communication from his would-be position coach at that school, Larry Johnson versus, Trey Scott and things like that. I can tell you, I know for a fact that is picked up on Georgia's end over the last couple of weeks. Georgia, there's nobody in this class that Kirby Smart, I believe, wants more than Edric Houston. He's a difference maker up front. He's the kind of guy that you see do things at the NFL Combine like Nolan Smith just did, like Jalen Carter would have done if he'd have got a chance to compete in that Combine and things like that. So I'm just telling you, he's a ridiculously talented young man, and Georgia's going to give it the full court press. The question is, he's got a lot of options. And listen, as Donut Dog on the vault will tell you, Buford has not been favorable to Georgia, and Georgia's looking to change that. Is Edric Houston one of the guys that can help change it? KJ Bolden is another guy they're trying to change it. So it didn't change last year with Justice Haynes, as everybody in the world thought it would, with him being a Georgia legacy. By the way, little side note, and I don't know if this is this may be a little salt in the wound to some people around here watching this show. I think Justice Haynes ends up being the number one back at Alabama this year. I think he ends up starting before it's all over with. I think Tommy Rees is going to want to run the football, and I think Justice Haynes is the guy to hand it to over there. So could be a big freshman year for him. Don't know that would have been the case for Justice Haynes with what Georgia has here, even though he's tremendously talented young man. All right, Big Dog. Jed, are there any updates on Deuce Robinson?
Not really. I mean, we talked about it before we came on air. It's kind of he's still in that wait and see mode. As far as baseball, I'm sure he's in the midst of the baseball season out there. And it's kind of we're going to wait and see how things go, what the draft stock reports look like, and then make decisions after that. And I think, Georgia had all that momentum going into February signing day. And yeah, as Trent has said on the show too, the longer it goes, the more likely it feels like Deuce might not end up in Athens, and we'll see. That's not to say it's set in stone, but that kind of feels like the way things are trending. Georgia had built it up; they were right there at the doorstep, but we couldn't cross the threshold there. And I feel like the I don't know, ship might have sailed maybe, but we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, baseball is going to be big for Deuce, so we'll see. We'll see how this spring goes for him. KSDJ 1869 asked a question about Jordan Seton. We already talked about him. I do believe Georgia ends up getting an official from him. We both believe that Georgia's a top 5 school for him. So we kind of touched on that earlier on. So go check that out. Scrolling back on the replay, or we can, if you're a member of the Vault, there'll be some exclusive notes for you tomorrow on the Vault in a war room, as we always tend to do. Doofus Dog, who will be Georgia's first 2024 O-line commit? Jed, if you have to go out on a limb and say who the first O-lineman to commit to Georgia in 2024 will be?
That is a good question. I mean, none of those guys I don't think really have a date. Let's go with
right now they're not far enough down the line, I don't think, with many of them.
Let's see. Let's go I don't know, Fletcher Westfall. I mean, he's a guy, he's been in Athens a lot. Stacy Searles has made him a priority. Made multiple visits to Athens. Like I said, he was at the Oregon game as well last year. I think he likes Georgia a lot. So yeah, I mean, I don't know about first. Again, I don't think any of these guys have a timeline set. but let's go with Fletcher Westfall just for kicks.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of work to be done as you see these new offers going out to like guys like Ethan Callaway to guys like Aiden Lynch. I think there's a lot of work to be done in terms of offensive line, and of course they're going to wait on Daniel Calhoun as long as he wants to wait. But I think the first guy you could see is Malachi Tolliver. I think Malachi Tolliver is a guy that Cartersville, Georgia just kind of has come on strong here as of late. He's a guy that's going to return this spring. He's going to do an official this summer. Malachi Tolliver is a guy I think you need to watch out for in terms of potential being in this offensive line class. And then Jarford, who in y'all's opinion do you think our best option for quarterback is next season? So he's not talking about a recruiting question. He's going to end with who is the actual quarterback for Georgia next year in the 2023 season. I mean, Jed, you may feel differently, but I feel like this is Carson Beck's job to lose. Listen, Coach Donnan and all those guys are more of the experts on the team play, but I just feel like the growth that you saw in Carson Beck in terms of his presence, the way he carried himself, the way he delivered the football, even in mop-up duty and things like that, I feel like he's just cognitively and, in terms of command, I think he's the guy that has the best opportunity to win it this spring.
Yeah, that's who I'd bet on too. He's been here the longest, and we all made all of this talk about the system staying more or less the same and all that kind of stuff. Well, when you say that, Carson Beck is the guy who's got the most time in this system, whatever it ends up looking like. So, and like you said, Blaine, he looked a lot better this year. He didn't have that deer in the headlights kind of look. He looked very efficient. I mean, he led probably 4 or 5 touchdown drives, which you couldn't have said in years past. So we'll see. I mean, Gunnar Stockton and Brock Vandagriff are going to get every shot. I mean, Kirby Smart's not the guy to anoint anybody for anything. Especially
they're not going to name. I'm just telling you, they are not going to name a starter after spring. There will not be someone said this is the starter. This is not going to happen. Now, there may be internally, they may know, hey, I'm probably not the guy, so I'm going to transfer or something like that. One of the people, but I just don't think that Kirby Smart comes out publicly and names a starter, particularly if it were to be. Now, this is recruiting related, particularly let's say Gunnar Stockton were to win the job. He's definitely not going to come out and name him the starter after the spring, because then you could possibly lose 2 quarterbacks and be down to 1 scholarship quarterback for the 2023 season. That would be a nightmare scenario if you are Kirby Smart and company. So that's what I just don't see happening in terms of roster management and all that kind of stuff. Jed, anything coming up on the site for everybody? That's all our vault questions. Anything coming up next couple of days that need to make sure they are subscribed for?
I mean, we're probably going to have a recruiting cheat sheet update this week. You mentioned the War Room notes that'll accompany this tomorrow. And then, yeah, man, I'm ready to get some visitors in town. It's been a long time. It feels like since we've been doing some visit recap stories. So ready to get those going. And yeah, spring practice starts a week from tomorrow. So not necessarily recruiting related, but the closest thing we're going to get to actual football until the end of August, early September. So ready for that to get going. To be subscribed to UGAsports.com. Make sure you get all of it.
Absolutely. And a couple of rapid fire here from Jeff Hightoff. He's been with us from the beginning here, so we want to answer a couple of his. Is Jed going to Indiana to see Nitro Tuggle in person? You got to make your way up to Indiana.
Too cold, brother. I ain't going back anytime soon. Maybe in the summer, get some, maybe
Nitro Tuggle is going to visit. He's going to do official visit June 23rd through 25th.
Yep.
So he'll be in town.
Yeah, he already got Georgia gloves on. Had Georgia gloves on his profile picture before he even had a Georgia offer. So clearly, a kid that loves Georgia. We'll see how things develop on that front.
And Jeff had another one. He said they flipped Gilbert to rub it in Ohio State again. So he's talking about 2025 defensive back. The first name eludes me. What's his first name?
Jonte Gilbert.
Yeah, Jonte Gilbert.
He's another guy that Georgia just has built so much momentum with over the past 3 months. Offered him in November, visited for the Tech game, visited again. 1 weekend in January. I can't remember if it was for the championship celebration or not, but he'll be back he'll be back this spring at some point. And he told me, he said, when I spoke with him Under Armour, he said Georgia feels like home, which, is not that uncommon a thing to hear from recruits, but it is a little eye-raising when you hear it from a kid already committed to another school. So Georgia's definitely got the momentum there. Wouldn't be shocked at all if he ends up either flipping straight to Georgia or decommitting and then committing to Georgia at some point.
No doubt, no doubt. That's and that's why you watch UGA Sports Rumors versus Fact. The reason you're subscribed to the Vault is because you find out things on January 11th that get broken. Today out here, like Jeremiah Smith visiting this summer, we're on top of the Dylan Rowell recruitment, all those kind of things. So make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you're subscribed not only on YouTube, but that you subscribe actually to the website and are part of the dog vent, of the Vault, all those good things. For Jed May, I am Blaine Gilmer. We'll catch you guys next Monday night live, 8:30. And then, of course, on Wednesday night, I will be live with former Georgia legends and, former Georgia players and NFL players, Tavares King, Noshawn Marino. We'll be breaking down some of the NFL Combine top performers around the SEC, because we cover not just Georgia, but also all the SEC on Georgia players section. So for my guy, Jed May here, I'm Blaine Gilmer. We'll catch you next time on UGA Sports Rumors versus Facts.